Hey, everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. I'm your host, Terry, coming to you from my home. And today is the 28th of October. Um, on this date, little personal thing. I wasn't there for it, but my parents got married on this day in 1959. Also, on this day in 1886, the Statue of Liberty was dedicated. President Grover Cleveland did that honor. On this day, speaking of monuments or things like that, on this day in 1965, which I was really surprised to learn it was that late, but the Gateway Arch in St. Louis was completed on this day in 1965. I don't know why, but I thought I'd been there for since, because they had a World's Fair in St. Louis back in the early 1900s, but I thought it was built for that reason. But because like the Eiffel Tower was built for a world exposition, and it was supposed to be temporary. Anyway, birthdays today. On this day in 1967, Julia Roberts was born, a great actress. On this day in 1955, Bill Gates was born. On this day in 1914, Jonas Salk, the I guess he's an inventor, the scientist, doctor who discovered or created the cure for or the vaccine for polio, was born on this day in 1914. So I wanted to talk today not really about trucking, but I'm sure that there are a gazillion truckers, involved in what I'm talking about, me being one of them. But I saw this thing the other day about a settlement that the state of Minnesota had agreed to with a couple of debt settlement companies. And just as kind of a preface to this, as of the second quarter of 2024, so the quarter ending in June on June 30th of 2024, there was $1.14 trillion worth of credit card debt held in the United States. So U.S. consumers owe $1.1 trillion to credit card companies. And credit card companies are mostly banks, but not always. That would include, like, if you had, a store credit card. I mean, oftentimes they're underwritten by banks, but the issuer might be a part of a store. But the reason I bring all this up is because I spent a large part of my legal career dealing with collections and credit cards, mortgages, all sorts of consumer debt instruments, also commercial debt instruments, but I don't want to talk about that today. And the reason that's of interest to me is because, and the fact that there was this settlement with these debt settlement companies, is because a lot of people, I've handled a lot of litigation over the years, and a lot of people lost cases in court, not because I had a particularly strong case or because my client was, was the type of client that, people would really think highly of, but because people didn't know the law, they didn't understand how the system worked, even though they were a big part of the system. I mean, think about it. American consumers are into this for $1.1 trillion, yet it's a system that they often don't understand, that the rules are often skewed to favor the creditors, and they often don't know what to do about it. So I wanted to, do this as kind of like a public service and kind of demystify some of the stuff. And I'm sure people will ask questions, and maybe that would be like the impetus to do a live at some point. But let me start out with just the notion of a credit card. Oftentimes people are like, oh, they just get a credit card. Sometimes they apply for a credit card right at a cash register because they're kind of being upsold to do that, and they're promised they'll get a discount as soon as the card's issued. Some of us have credit cards because we want, you know, points for travel, like hotels or airlines. A lot of airlines have what are called affinity cards. A lot of organizations have affinity cards. I used to represent a bank that was based in Nebraska, and they had the NRA affinity credit card. The funny thing about that, and this is just an aside, but that bank got so sick of like the NRA, like what they would say after there was a mass shooting or something, that they basically said to the NRA, "Hey, we're no longer going to be the sponsor of your affinity credit card." And I guess that's just, NRA members can get that credit card and show their affinity. Sports teams have them, colleges have them. Some of them, create like an affinity where there's some charitable donation given by the credit card underwriter to the organization. So maybe like the World Wildlife Federation or something like that. But in any event, a lot of that's marketing, and it's just marketing to get people to get a credit card. That's how banks market. They have these alliances with other businesses that you do want to patronize or support. So lots of people have credit cards. I'm not here to talk about the evils of credit or credit cards. They're a necessary evil in a lot of situations. A lot of places won't even take cash anymore. Try getting an airline ticket without a credit card. Try renting a car without a credit card, or checking into a hotel without a credit card. Yeah, you can do it with a debit card that has the little Visa logo or the little MasterCard logo, but it's hard and they tie up your money. I rented a car recently, and none of the charges for the car even showed up until after I had turned the car in. But if I'd have done that with a debit card, they would have held up like $1,000 of my cash. So credit cards, necessary evil. So supposing for a moment you find yourself in trouble with credit cards, and lots of Americans are in trouble with credit cards. A lot of people go into default. You might get a call from the credit card company itself, the issuer. My advice is don't ignore that. Explain the situation to them. Like if you lost your job, if there's something else going on, try to explain it to them and try to work it out with them. Here's a secret that a lot of people don't get. Credit card companies, once a card goes into default, okay, credit card companies want to limit the damage. And oftentimes, once the card's in default, like you've missed a couple of payments, they're willing to settle that whole debt for sometimes 50 cents on the dollar. Other times, they're willing to basically close the account and settle for, say, 70% and set up a payment plan. Now, if you have no money coming in, you probably can't do that. A lot of people, because of, oftentimes they get in a pickle, they lose a job, and they don't have just one credit card. They have like 7, and they're constantly shuffling between them, paying the minimum on one, paying the minimum on another. It's like a shell game. And eventually that catches up to people a lot of the time. And so what they do is they find themselves owing a bunch of creditors, unsecured creditors. So not necessarily a car loan, but maybe a car loan. But a lot of credit cards, gym memberships, hospital bills, etc. A lot, excuse me, a lot of unsecured credit. And they're constantly getting phone calls. So what do? They don't want to deal with it. In fact, because they can't deal with it, they don't have the money to deal with these people. Or they run out of money because they've dealt with a few of these people. So they turn to the credit workout industry, right? Companies that they're debt management companies. Now, I've litigated on both sides of these cases. I've represented defendants who are debtors, but I've also represented banks. I've represented a lot of big banks, and I've handled hundreds and hundreds of these cases. So let me tell you about the debt management companies. First of all, don't confuse them with debt consolidation. What these companies are doing is they're saying, hey, tell us all the credit cards you got, and we'll total up all of the debt that's owed. We'll come up with an aggregated number. And then what we're going to do is we're going to have you give us one payment a month, and we'll settle your credit card debts for pennies on the dollar. Well, so what happens is people say, oh, I'm going to, instead of making all these minimum payments and never getting out of debt, I'm going to go to this credit counseling, credit, management company, debt management company, and they go by lots of different titles, but I'm going to go to one of them, and instead of me paying like $700 a month to make all my minimums, I'm going to pay them $500 a month, and they're going to handle all my problems. They're going to be the ones that I won't have to answer any more calls from debt collectors. I won't have to do any of this. Well, in theory, that sounds like a great idea, but here's the problem. What happens is these credit card companies get a letter, a standard letter from, the debt management company, and it says, John Q. Public is given this debt management company power of attorney, and they can negotiate on my behalf. Now, the way these credit management or debt management companies make money is a couple of ways. One is they take the money you give them and they put it in escrow. So, in order to settle, let's say you have a credit card with a $2,000 debt on, or excuse me, $4,000. There's $4,000 owed. Well, if that creditor will only take a lump sum of 50% of the balance, so in other words, $2,000, the company, that debt management company, is going to have to wait for 4 months until you sent them $500. Oh, and by the way, every time you send them money, there's a monthly fee for their services. Now, oftentimes it's not a lot, but it could be $20 a month, could be $30 a month, could be $50 a month. So it's going to take you 4 months or more to get to the level of cash that's going to be required to settle with that one credit card company. Meanwhile, everybody else is after your money. And here's the thing. A debt collector, and there's a couple of things that govern this. The Fair Debt Collection Practices Act is the main one. That's federal legislation. The credit card companies, or their collectors, because sometimes they've sent it to collection. In other words, they've already written the debt off and somebody else has purchased the debt, which is absolutely legal. If you owe money on a credit card, I can buy that debt. And in fact, there have been like celebrities that have bought like massive piles of debt and just forgiven it. John Oliver did that on his show. He bought like, I don't know, I think it was like $2-3 million worth of medical debt, and he just forgave it, right? He just told people, oh, you don't owe this money anymore. Because that $2-3 million, by the way, probably bought $20 million worth of actual debt. Because the debt, when it's sold, when it's written off and sold, it's sold for pennies on the dollar. So a lot of companies will buy it for, say, 25 cents on the dollar, and they hope if they can collect 30 cents on the dollar, then they've made a handsome profit. So they don't even have to collect from everybody, and they don't have to collect everything from anybody to make money on these deals, but they buy it in bulk, right? That's how you save money. You buy in bulk. So what happens though is a lot of people that use these debt management companies don't realize that there is absolutely nothing that prevents the creditor from suing them for breach of contract. In other words, you could say, ABC Debt Management is handling all my affairs for me now. I pay them every month. And a creditor could say, okay, fine, but you owe us $5,000 and we're going to sue you for it. And a lot of these companies won't tell you up front that you can be sued. And here's the thing, the second you go in default, and default just means that you have not met your contractual obligations under the contract, right? All that fine print you see in that credit card notice that you get every month. Or you said you get when you signed up for a credit card electronically. I can't tell you how many times I went to court and there were people there and they're like, I'm working with this debt settlement company. I don't have any money. You're going to have to get it from them. And my response to that would be, hey, look, I get what you're saying, but it is your money. And a lot of times, and creditors do not have to deal with a debt settlement company. If the numbers are right, the creditor will deal with them, but they don't have to. In the meantime, you're paying additional fees to get a settlement that you probably could get yourself. In other words, if you had the $2,000 on the $4,000 credit card debt, you could make a phone call. Once it's in default, say, look, here's what I can do. I got $2,000. I can send it to you today as full and final payment. If they accept that deal, you just get a statement from them saying that the card's paid off and there's a zero balance, right? And you want to make sure that they can't litigate do any additional litigation or do any litigation, and that the residual cannot be sold, okay? But you can do this stuff yourself. So the reason that these credit management or debt management companies had to settle with the state of Minnesota is not because the state of Minnesota thinks they're great. No, it's because they were cheating their clients. In other words, they had people that were desperate for help because they're up against big banks like Citibank, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Chase, you name it, Capital One. Those are some of the big ones that issue credit cards. They were up against these big banks and they wanted help. They wanted the phone to stop ringing and they wanted to quit having to talk to credit, to debt collectors. So just beware that you could do exactly what those credit management companies do without paying for the fees. If you were disciplined, and this is where it comes in a lot of times. People say, hey, I'm in default on all these cards, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to save up money every dime I can to settle these debts. You can do that on your own, but you have to be disciplined. That $500 a month, that's got to go someplace and not be touched. You got to just say, nope, I'm not going to touch it. Now, you're still going to have to take the phone calls or ignore the phone calls either way. But you might get a knock on the door and it might be a process server saying, hey, Chase Bank has sued you. Ta-da, here's the lawsuit. But let's say that does happen. Okay, well, first of all, don't ignore it, because ignoring it is not going to fix the problem. And I could tell you that if you ignore it, that bank is going to get a judgment against you and it's going to be entered into the public record and it's going to have a really big impact on you. If for no other reason than because the judgments collect interest at what is called the legal rate. And it varies from state to state. But with interest rates having spiked higher over the past couple of years, it's probably the case that the legal rate of interest has gone higher because legislatures typically track the markets. So you don't want to ignore this. Now, let's say that you do have some money or you could make a payment plan. You could make a payment. I used to be authorized to do 50%. I think I was able to do 50% of the debt payable over 12 months. So in other words, that $4,000 credit card bill, there's going to be a little attorney's fees, court costs, right? But let's say it's $2,000. Well, let's say that I added, 500. Well, it would just make it easy. Let's say I added 400 for attorney's fees and court costs, right? So total $2,400. I had the authority in the hallway of the courthouse to dismiss your case as long as you agreed to pay $200 a month for the next 12 months. And oftentimes, here's another secret. Oftentimes, I would, like today's the 28th of October. I probably would not have anybody making their first payment on one of those settlements. If I settled on 28 October, the first payment would be like, the first Monday in November. So you wouldn't even have to come up with money that day, and you'd be getting out of it for 50 cents on the dollar, basically. But you can't ignore it, right? You got to do something about it. You got to show up and meet a guy like me. And here's the crazy thing. I know tons of collection attorneys, and I don't know any of them that were like, hateful, because our job was just get a resolution. The last resort was getting a judgment. If I could work something out with somebody, I would. I always would. And sometimes they would even come in they would say, this is all I can do. I'd be like, yeah, let me make a phone call. And sometimes I would even request a continuance on the case so that I could get information back from my client as to whether they would take a different offer. But sometimes, and let's say you say, oh, I couldn't do it in a year. I would have deals where I would do it like 2 years, but it'd be slightly more. It'd be like 60 or 70% of the original debt payable over 2 years. Case gets dismissed. You don't have any judgment against you. That is not uncommon. Now, let me talk about debt collectors for a second. So there are different kinds of collectors. Like the credit card company itself at first is going to try to get you to bring your payments current, and they're not really going to give you any deals. But then at some point, they don't want their people working on it, and they sell it to a collection agency. Okay. And collection agencies have a strict set of rules that they're supposed to go by, often governed by the FDCPA, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, and also a lot of times state law. So there are things, if you don't want to talk to them, you don't have to. But, you may want to talk to them just to keep the lines of dialogue open. Here's the thing about settling with a debt collector or a collection agency. They work on commission because so there's two ways that they could get that account, right? The first one is that it's just referred to them for help. In other words, the credit card company says, hey, help us collect on this. And then the way they make money is they get to keep a portion of what they collect. They give the rest to the credit card company. But a lot of times people say, oh, well, they want me to pay $700. I'll just pay that and they'll leave me alone. Wrong. They won't. They'll take your money, but they will not leave you alone. In fact, it will probably embolden them to think that they can get more money out of you. In other words, they can make more money. And debt collectors, oftentimes, it's probably not as bad as it was 10, 15 years ago. But these folks will say stuff that's unfair, that's illegal, that may even be them committing a crime. People are threatened. They're like, well, we'll call your neighbors and let them know that you're a deadbeat and you don't pay your debts. The ironic thing is that they might have called your neighbor just before they called you and said the exact same thing to them. That's illegal, by the way. They'll threaten to call your employer and tell them. Illegal. There are processes for all this stuff. And, what I would say is, let's say that you owe, I don't know, pick a number, $10,000 on a credit card, right? Hold on, I got to replenish here. You owe $10,000 on a credit card. Well, you probably didn't get in $10,000 in debt overnight, and you're not going to get out of $10,000 in debt overnight. They're going to say, hey, we just need to see a payment. Now, and here's the thing about the default. Here's the thing you got to keep in mind about the default. The second you go in default, you are fair game to be sued. Now, they won't sue you right off the bat because they're still going to try to get their money without paying a lawyer to go to court for them. But know that, let's say that $10,000, they're like, look, let me work with you. Just give me a $500 payment, and, we can, you can come back to us, and they'll tell you all sorts of stuff, right? Same thing a bad ex would have told you, and you're going to say, okay, $500, and then I got some breathing room. You pay the $500. Well, first of all, that's not going to change what happens with any of your other credit cards. That's the first thing. The second thing is that the odds are that unless you're going to think, okay, well, maybe they won't call me till next month, right? It'll buy me 30 days. Wrong. That somebody may call you in 4 days. It might be a different collector, but at the same company. They're going to call you again, and you'll be like, I just gave you guys $500. And they're like, yeah, but with interest, you owe $9,800. And you're like, wait a minute, it was $10,000, I paid you $5,000, should be $9,500. And they're like, yeah, but it's at the default interest rate, and you just incurred another $300 worth of charges. And so that's a no-win situation for most people, unless you can immediately negotiate a payoff. And with a collection company, I certainly wouldn't offer them more than like 50%. And the way to approach it is this, because I've done negotiations. Here's the way to do it. You say, hey, look, it just so happens that I got $5,000 in my bank account. My great aunt Gertrude died, and she left me $5,000. You can have the $5,000 as full and final payment. Now, don't say that unless you got the $5,000. But if you do, and you really want to get rid of these guys, that might be a way to do it. But again, even once, somebody may litigate this, and they'll try to get more money out of you. Here's the other thing to know. Because a lot of this debt is sold, it often happens that the credit card company sells the debt after it's been in default for, let's say, a year. In most states, there's a statute of limitations on contracts. So if a debt's over beyond the statute of limitations, no one can collect on it. If they haven't already taken legal action, they cannot, pursuant to the law, sue you for that. And that's an absolute, that's an affirmative defense to a breach of contract case. And I'll give you a perfect example. I had a friend call me one day, and he said, hey, so-and-so, his wife, I know her name also, but he says, hey, she's got this, she got sued for this credit card, and she said, she hasn't done anything with it for like 4 years, meaning she hadn't made a payment in at least 4 years. But interestingly, when I looked at the documents, I discovered that there was a $100 payment made within the statute of limitations. But I said to her, I called her up, I was like, hey, did you make this $100 payment? Because if she didn't, that means that somebody else did. And here's the little secret. Here's the dirty little secret. The buyer of the credit card debt will oftentimes say that a payment was made and credit the account for the payment, but it'll be a de minimis payment. So this was like a $4,800 debt. They said she made a $100 payment, and it just so happened to be like a month. How do I want to explain this? So when the last payment was made, it was like, and I think the statute of limitations was 2 years. It was like 23 months before they filed. But she's like, I didn't make that payment, Terry. I said, can you get your bank records? And she said, yeah. And so, because I wanted to make sure what my case was going to look like. So she got her bank records, and it was a whole procedural rigmarole because the court mishandled some of my motions. And then I filed an appeal, and I appealed it to the circuit court. And we had what is called a de novo trial. In other words, a new trial on the facts. And I won that case, and it cost, I did the work for $400, but they wanted like $4,800. But that's a little trick that happens. You'll be like, man, I haven't dealt with this credit card for 3.5 years, and all of a sudden somebody's calling you up about it. And they're like, well, you made a payment 2 years ago. Well, you might be like, no, I didn't. You might have just walked on it. What you want to do is check and see what the statute of limitations is. And then if it's outside the statute of limitations and you didn't make the payment, that's a defense to that case. I used to get cases dismissed for jurisdictional errors. So they would file a suit against somebody, but they'd file in the wrong county. And, the county will just take that lawsuit, and the county court clerk, they'll just take that lawsuit, and because they collect a fee for docketing it. But what you need to do is say, well, wait a minute, I live in Smith County. I was sued in Murphy County. They don't have personal jurisdiction over me. Now, some of the stuff that I'm telling you is kind of inside baseball. It's stuff that lawyers would know. But sometimes, you might have to be your own lawyer. But if you find yourself in these situations, just know that you're very susceptible to being sued. But being sued just means there's a dispute. A lot of times people think, I've had people say to me, I say, hey, does it sound right that, you owed $3,200 on this credit card? And people would be like, well, yeah, I guess so, because the bank, they have good records. No, never, ever do that. Contest everything, and then, if you contest it, then they're gonna have to, I'll tell you the process, at least in Maryland, but in many, many states. So once they're past like the initial stage of the court case, they're going to have to bring in a witness to testify, a witness from the company. The lawyer can't just go in there and throw some credit card statements on the table in front of the judge and go, see, judge, they owe the money, and have the judge go, oh, okay. But if you don't show up for court, that's exactly what happened. The judge will be like, is John Q. Public here? Nope. Okay, I'm going to enter a default judgment. I've gotten hundreds and hundreds of judgments just like that. People didn't show up for court. I've had cases where other lawyers didn't show up for court, and guess what? I won those cases. But never assume that the company is right. Never assume that they did the right thing. A lot of times people confuse authority with truthfulness. Just because a bank says you owe something doesn't mean you do. Just because a company that says they're Acme Finance LLC and they bought this debt from, Chase Bank, that it's right. No, fight them on at every turn and make them prove their case if you really want to litigate it. If you kind of know it's yours and you're like, hey, I'll just settle this, you can get pretty good deals on these. The best advice I can give is, if you find yourself in this pickle, don't ignore stuff. Don't ignore stuff. Get a handle on it. Push back on everything. Deny everything. That's the way to win at this game, right? If they find out you're going to put up a fight, they're going to move. They're like bullies, right? They're like They're the big, strong bully, but they don't want to have to throw hands with anybody because the little guy that they're throwing hands with might actually be Mike Tyson. He might be just this 5'10" guy, and they think they're Goliath. They don't want to have to throw hands with anybody. Excuse me. It's not part of their business model. So anyway, I know this has been a little long-winded. It's a fairly complicated subject, but I hope it's been useful to people. And like I said, if there are a bunch of questions and people put comments and stuff and asking about stuff, I'll do a live. And if I have specific fact patterns that you're willing to share, I mean, I won't share your name, obviously, but then I can talk about, oh, well, this person's in, Nebraska, and here's what the law says, because it's not hard to find it if you know what you're looking for. Or this person's in Oregon, here's what it says about this. But the bottom line here is that with that much debt outstanding, banks are kind of concerned about people's ability to pay. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of banks that if somebody's been in default for a year and they can settle that for 50 cents on the dollar and paid out over 6 months, they're going to be like, yeah, we'll do that. So anyway, be safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.